Hey, welcome to this month's episode of the CMN Church Planting Podcast. My name is Aaron Burke. I get the honor of being the host of this podcast. If you don't know me, I planted a church in Tampa, Florida in 2013 through CMN, and it has been the joy of my life to be a church planter, church leader, church multiplier. We want to help you do the same thing. We want to help you plant, help you lead, help you multiply. And we have had incredible episodes so far. So if you haven't listened to previous ones, make sure you go back and check them out. We release new content every single month. And we do have our annual conference in March. We'd love to see you there at the CMN conference in Houston. But today I am with a leadership legend, the turnaround man, the man that has helped so many churches in the Pacific Northwest. We're going to talk to Don Ross today. And Don, for those that don't know who you are, give us a little background on who Don Ross is.
Hey, thanks. Happy to be here. I serve as the network leader, Northwest Ministry Network, Idaho, North Panhandle, and all of Washington State, about 350 churches or so. Previous to that, I led a church in Seattle for 20 years that had declined from 2,000 down to 150, and then back up the other side. I tell the story in my book, Turnaround Pastor, shameless plug. Sorry.
Hey, you got to do it.
All right.
When did you step into that?
95.
What was the church is that? So is that 2000? And then when you stepped in, it was when?
I jumped in at 350, couldn't stop the bleeding, bottomed out at 150. So when people say, describe your 20 years, I say 10 years of hell, 5 years of purgatory, and 5 years of heaven. So that's kind of that's the story. So we really shifted at about the 10-year mark when we bottomed out and decided to be a church plant, to see ourselves as a church plant.
Wow.
We became, it's a turnaround story, but it's a church plant with assets. Now, a church plant that's a turnaround has assets more than the normal church plant.
Right.
But we also have more baggage than the normal church plant. It was during that period of time I began to understand the kind of things that, that really stop any kind of a leader, hold them hostage. So
okay, and I want to get into that. I just want to ask some real practical questions.
Yeah, sure.
Because some of those are in those stories. Maybe they had those flagship kind of churches, 60, 70, 80-year-old churches they've taken over. And did you change the name? Did you change the bylaws?
Yeah.
Did you change the board?
Everything.
Everything.
Yeah. When I came, we had 5 board meetings a month.
Five board meetings a month.
One was a 4-hour board meeting where we oversaw the church and the school. Okay, which I had no control over the school at all. And then we had a board meeting every Friday morning at 6 a.m. where the board planned the weekend service. That's what I know.
Wow. That sounds miserable. How did you navigate that change?
Well,
because I'm sure they didn't want to give that up, or maybe they did.
Well, I had to determine what they wanted to give up and what they didn't, and determine how to get where we needed to go. So I just observed for a while and then began to ask critical questions. The key thing, I had John Maxwell as a prof in seminary, and he trains you to target the highest level influencer. So I zeroed in on my highest influencer, began to have breakfast with him every week. And so there was no surprises to him ever in the board meeting, and he began to run the ball for me. And that's really how we made many, many changes.
That is unbelievable. You said about 10 years it turned the corner?
Well, that's where it started to turn. Actually, I didn't feel like I was really the pastor. I was just the weekend preacher for the first 5 or 6 years.
Wow.
Then began, because the former lead pastor stayed on as my associate. It was part of the contract, part of the deal.
When did you finally look out and go, I like this church?
Yeah, this is my house.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was probably at year 15 when we'd sold our campus and transitioned to a brand new campus. We had 4 acres in Seattle and we bought 10 acres at the next city up.
And do you think that helped turn the corner?
Oh my goodness, yes. That was absolutely the shift. Yeah, we moved in with 200 people. We added 1 new service every 10 months for the next 5 years.
Wow.
It was a rocket ride.
Okay, so I just want you to talk to the pastor who is in those first 10 to 15 years that you were in. The change is very slow. It's very difficult. I hear from them all the time. Church planting is like a jet ski. You can turn it on a dime. It's a blast. But some of them are in churches and they can't do that.
Right.
What's your encouragement for them?
Well, you got to know that Jesus wants you there, first of all, because then you can endure whatever you need to endure. One of his words to the 7 churches was strengthen what remains.
Wow.
Okay. And there are some churches that need to die, and you're called there to help them die. I mean, we don't like that, but churches have a life cycle. So you have to know that you're called to be there. I carried around this way, way, way back in the day, okay, before anything electronic, I carried 3 color graphs of 10% growth over the next 5 years, 20 and 30% growth. I never entered into my mind at all that we would decline, that we would have to be purged and sifted and pruned. And all 3 of those are separate processes, and every turnaround church goes through it. Every church plant goes through it. So you just have to kind of buckle in and go for the ride. Jesus has been doing this for 2,000 years. He knows what he's doing. This is not his first rodeo. I lean into him. And that can be painful because he leaned into me. Here's the key phrase. You got to have a turnaround inside before you have a turnaround outside.
It's great. Very good. Very good. And for you, that turnaround inside.
Ministry was kind of a way of my own personal affirmations. Okay. I wasn't there to move the kingdom of God forward. Now that it's insidious because I would have said that I was.
Yeah.
I was. Okay. But I'd been fired by my previous church. And one morning I'm prepping a sermon, and I'm praying, and God says, you need to have a heart change before the people can have a heart change. And took me to Moses and showed me how God changed Moses's heart at the burning bush. Here's an interesting thing. In Exodus 4, I believe, no, it's chapter 2, anyway, at the burning bush. And he said, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He doesn't say, I'm the God of your fathers. He's talking about his earthly father. Now, in the Hebrew, you can kind of read it either way. But my sense is because Moses got real quiet and bowed his head almost in shame because he'd been running from God, and now he has to face his fear. Whether you're a church planter or a turnaround, whether you're no matter what you're doing, if you're following Jesus, you will be forced to face your fears. And in that moment, Moses said, okay, I recognize I wouldn't be alive if it wasn't for my dad facing down Pharaoh's edict. I'm going to have to face down Pharaoh's edict myself. And he dealt with his own fears. Well, that was me. I'd been fired by my previous board. I was scared of that happening again. Consequently, I hedged every bet, every leadership, bled risk out of everything that I possibly could. And until I came to terms with my own fears, wrestled them through so that I wouldn't be held hostage. You always have fear. But there is a difference between dealing with your fear and being obedient and being held hostage by your fear.
Very good. Very good. All right, we're going to talk about 2 things that really hold young leaders hostage and keep them back from all that God has for them. I love this. Let's go into the first one.
Antagonists.
Now, when you said this to me, I was taken back immediately. I've been doing this almost 20 years now, and I was like, I get it, but explain to people what that means.
Sure. An antagonist comes from the inside, creates tension in order to gain power.
Wow.
Paul said in Acts 28, I know after I leave, raging wolves will come in from among you.
Right.
On the night that Jesus was betrayed, we take that every time we take communion.
Right.
You, as a leader, you have to let people in, okay? And there are leaders that want to take control. They don't have to necessarily be in the first chair. They just have to control the first chair. And the way that they will do that is through intimidation, through anger, whatever it takes to create tension. Because we're pastors, we're shepherds, we're going to keep it down and keep it peaceful, okay?
Right.
And so we will acquiesce, we'll give in. And after a while, it's no longer Jesus' agenda, it's theirs. There's 3 different kinds.
Okay.
There's a hardcore, there's a major, and there's a moderate. Here's an example. If you see a moderate antagonist, you pass each other on the street, they'll stare at you. You see a major antagonist, they'll come across the street and knock you down. You see a hardcore antagonist, they'll take you out. They don't mind if they die in the process as long as you do.
Wow.
Okay.
Wow.
And there's only one way to deal with I found this so helpful. I almost memorized his book, Kenneth Houck's book, Antagonists in the Church, because you have to deal with this. One of the reasons a church won't grow and can't move forward is that leaders get held hostage by the opinion and the actions of other leaders around them.
Unreal. Okay, so I'm thinking of that board member that you were talking about. Maybe he wasn't one of them. I'm just thinking of most people have those. Maybe it's a board member, maybe it's a small group leader, maybe it's a worship team member, and they're fighting for power. How do you address it?
Well, first of all, you have to be patient. You have to be wise.
Right.
Okay, wise as a serpent, harmless as a dove. That's what you've got to be. Then you have to give them time. And here's what I discovered with every single antagonist I dealt with. And I haven't dealt with a lot of them because it's really unusual. By the way, everybody is antagonistic from time to time.
Sure.
Everybody's argumentative from time to time. That doesn't make you an antagonist. An antagonist intentionally creates tension to gain power.
Wow.
And so you have to be patient, and they play out. And over time, Jesus will give you the opportunity to take them out. There'll be a vote that comes up. There'll be a decision. I had an antagonist that was not healthy on our staff, made a major clerical error, a financial error. And I remember my wife looking and said, Jesus is giving you an opportunity. If you play nice, you'll continue to deal with this. But this is your opportunity to take them out. You know what David's last words were? King David, man after my own heart. His last words, a hit. To Solomon, he said, you know Shimei and the way he treated me. You know how to make sure that his gray hair doesn't go down to the grave in peace. That's his last words. He's going to see Christ.
Right.
He realizes his son is going to have to deal with this antagonist in his new kingdom, and he warns him about it.
Do you ever have a moment to just straight up confront the antagonist?
Well, there are times when you will do that, but that's really what they want. That raises the tension.
That's amazing. Yeah.
So
we had a guy, early days of church planning, and I'm telling you, he came in, and they come in so
they're ready to buy you a new suit, take you to dinner.
Absolutely.
How can we help you? What do you need?
I was the biggest thing that's ever happened to his life.
Yeah.
He comes.
Nobody's taught the Bible like you.
Nobody. He wanted to run our parking team and wanted to do any way I can serve, Pastor.
Right.
So we launched a church. About 9 months later, my wife gives birth to our second child. Him and his wife come to the hospital, which thank God for those days are kind of over to people come to the hospital after the birth. But he shows up and says, I need to meet with you, pulls me aside, and for 45 minutes tells me everything that's wrong with the church that's been going on and how he's the solution for it all.
Right.
And I realized at that moment, first of all, I have no boundaries. And I just let this guy in my life.
Right.
And two, I'm never going to appease this guy. Like, it was a miracle. The Lord let him out. But it was that same scenario going, either the Lord's going to let me control this church or this guy's going to try to control it.
That's right. That's right. If you give them an inch, they will take the mile. Absolutely.
All right. Anything else on the antagonist?
Well, there are 5 different levels of conflict, and you have to understand what they are.
Okay.
So everybody has a contest. Everybody has issue. There's a problem to solve. Think of this in a triangle. So the top 2 tiers, problem to solve, and then disagreements. You're going to deal with problems. That's what churches do. They're going to disagree. Then you hit that 3rd category where there's this contest of wills. About halfway through that, then you end up in danger ground. Now you're in the red zone, which takes to the 4th category, fight or flight. This is a confrontation, and now moves into the last category, which is an intractable position. That's where I live as a network leader. That's when I get called into intractable situations. So here's the rule of thumb. When there is no good solution, the next best choice is a quick solution.
Okay, explain that, because that is brilliant.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know there's brilliant.
I think it's brilliant.
I will explain that. Okay. When there is a board and a pastor and they are at odds, neither one of them will move. And I am called in to break the tie, to make the decision.
Right.
Here's the guideline I use. Seek first the kingdom of God. Which decision will move the kingdom forward? Sometimes it's supporting the pastor and telling the board they're wrong. Sometimes it's the opposite, telling the pastor he's wrong and supporting the board. But you need to make that decision. It can't be delayed. So we work it out after a while, but we need to make the decision. I just was on the phone this morning with my assistant. He's dealing with a very difficult situation. There is an empty pastorate. The associate's trying to take over, needs to be removed. We made that decision quickly because then you can start healing. Will the church split? Yes, the church will split. There's no way to avoid this. But the longer we protract the situation, the worse the split will be.
Yep, I get that. Just talking through, because it's very easy for the pastor to point the finger at that person wants control, that person is trying to, they're against the vision God's. When are we the problem?
I think you have to start from the position that I always could be part of the problem. I have to ask that question.
Yes.
And so I have to have trusted, people in my life, brothers and sisters. I start with my wife.
Yep.
I say, honey, talk to me about this. Well, is this what you want? What's your attitude? What do you hope for? And so what are your motives? Zero in on that. So you have to have trusted people. I go through my executive team. And then I go through my executive presbytery. I have a high trust. We lead in our executive team with the mutual submission principle. We submit to one another because we each have areas that we focus in.
Great.
Doesn't mean that you totally run the show and I can't question you, but I'm going to lean into you. And so that provides a security when you need to make a difficult decision.
I love that. I just think it's so important when you're making decisions in vacuums. I mean, most of the time you're wrong. It's flesh, but having that trusted advisory team around you. I think of my executive team. I'm like, each one of their lives, they have a PhD in one area that I don't have a PhD in.
Yeah.
They have an elementary education where I have a PhD, and we respect each other in those ways.
Yeah.
And then I love what you said about your spouse. And I just want to encourage planters, leaders. The voice of the Holy Spirit many times sounds just like your spouse. It's amazing how I'll go to my wife and I'll go, am I off in this? And she says, yeah, I was waiting for you to ask. I was waiting. I thought that was weird. No, you shouldn't have posted that. You should have. So I think there's something about making those decisions in teams that makes a big difference, because you could be the one that's wrong. It could be, you think they're the wolf, and we all got a little wolf inside of us.
We do.
And we need to deal with that. Let's sit on one more. We only got a couple more minutes left, but you talked about the money side.
Yeah, the two things that hold most leaders hostage are people and money. And the primary people issue is dealing with antagonists. There are other things, but that seems to surface the most. The other one has to do with money. There's never going to be enough money to do everything you want to do, period. Let's just accept that right from the get-go. But let's also accept a faith-filled statement that says there will always be enough money to do what God wants me to do.
Very good.
Jesus would never ask me to do something and not give me the time to do it.
Right.
Okay? Time is money. When we give back to God, we give back the equivalent of time, whatever we earned, and we give that back to him, okay? Jesus would never ask me to do something without actually giving me the money. Now, again, fear enters in. I was talking with a pastor just this week, and he says, we're going through financial problems. Well, do you do an annual stewardship series? Minimum 3 to 6 weeks. Do you boldly challenge people to both tithe, which is God's money, and offerings, which is their money? Have you ever done a tithing challenge? We did a tithing challenge every year in our church where we challenged people to tithe for 90 days.
Yep.
And if they believed they'd made a mistake at the end of those 90 days, we'd give them their money back.
It's amazing.
Not one person ever asked for that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So zeroing in and believing that there is a God-given resource that's available for you. And then being wise in how you spend it. Okay, have the breakdown. We do a thing called per capita giving, and the scale that's connected with that. You're familiar with it?
No, tell us.
Okay, so imagine a meter that goes back from 1,500 to 3,500. Okay, I do this with all churches, church plants or not. Okay, anything below around the 1,500 mark, the sweet spot's around 2,200 per capita. So you take your total giving for the year divided by your average Sunday morning attendance. Men, women, children, pregnant women, count them twice. Okay? That's what we do. The closer you are to 1,500, probably the younger church you are, the more new disciples you have, the more you need to focus on stewardship, not just of money, but of all the resources. Okay. The closer you get to 3,500, probably the older congregation you are, and you're going to need to focus on outreach, because chances are you're not going to have that many inside that. So I would do an average per quarter. So I'd take 4 reads a year to find out where my per capita giving was, to help me craft the language as to whether I needed to be leaning into stewardship or leaning into outreach.
It's brilliant. I love that. People have asked me multiple times, going back into church planning, what would I have done different? And one of the things is I would have done our stewardship series, our first stewardship series, earlier. And most of the time, people are always going, I waited a year, I waited 6 months. We waited, I think it was about 9 months, and I wish we would have done it in the first 6 months. It's a discipleship thing. It's a way to disciple your people in their financial stewardship and honoring God and putting God first. Where their treasure is, their heart will be also. And the money's there. You just gotta.
There are three categories. There are people that are already tithing. They love you teaching on that. There are people who will never give to God. You can't win them anyway. It's that middle crew. They're the ones that their heart is open. They're looking to take the next step of obedience.
It's unbelievable. We do a finance series every year. Same thing, do the 90-day tithing challenge. It is where I get the most, I feel like, demonic pushback during those times, but it's also the thing that accelerates the vision the most.
There's a breakthrough on the other side.
Absolutely. And it's not just a breakthrough with me. I'm not trying to build a church. I'm trying to build them. And I know in my life, when I give to God, or when I have that moment of sacrificial generosity, above and beyond the tithe, where we make a sacrifice for a missionary or a project or the church, it does more in me than anything else. And I'm like, the enemy knows the power.
But you have to be willing to inject the tension into that moment. And if you are afraid of making people feel uncomfortable, well, maybe ministry's not for you anyway. But you have to be willing to tell them the truth, or they'll never rise to the challenge.
And you're always going to get pushback, just so you pastors know, especially you young church planners, where people are going to ask you and say things like, well, the church shouldn't talk about money. You know, Jesus talked about money more than any other subject. He talked about the Gospels, that Paul's epistles are filled full of financial advice. You go to the Proverbs, so many of our Proverbs are talked about money and how to spend, and with wisdom. So we talk about things that the Bible talks about, and the Bible talks about money because money's connected with people's hearts. And it's a big deal. Anything else on this subject?
Jesus talked about money more than heaven and hell combined. If I did 52 sermons a year and talked about money at the same percentage, money and possessions, that Jesus did, 37 sermons a year would be focused on finances and possessions.
Unbelievable.
Because Jesus knows what's in our heart.
He does. He does. Thank you for the wisdom that you pour into our movement, into CMN church planners. For those that are in the Pacific Northwest, you're already a huge icon, a huge leader in that area. But for those that are around the nation that listen to this, check out more about what God is doing through Don. Your book again?
Turnaround Pastor.
Turnaround Pastor. Where can they get it?
Amazon.
Amazon's right there. So if you know pastors that are needing turnaround situations, make sure you check that out. And thanks for listening to our CMN podcast. I hope this is helpful. I would love to hear your feedback. You know, feedback hurts sometimes, but it's always helpful. And so I want to know how we can make this better, how we can continue to improve. And it's for you. It's to add value to your life. We want to be the church planting podcast. So make sure you share this with your friends, those in ministry that are church planners, church leaders, church multipliers, and let's truly change the world and plant a healthy church in every community.